My name's Colby. I'm the group editor of Headliner magazine, the Headliner Group. On the call today, we've got Paul Watson, who's the founder and editor-in-chief of Headliner. We're joined by Dave Derr of Empirical Labs and Niklas Odelholm of Softube. The two companies have just collaborated on an impressive new product bundle. There's 4 in total. It's a collection of native plugins is, of course, modelled and fine-tuned for mixing professionals and recording engineers. Now, I know you guys have been working together for sort of 10, 15 years, but it's the first time that you've really launched some products together. Why did you guys feel like now was the right time to release a new bundle and to collaborate in this way? And why does it sort of make sense for you guys to do it at this time?
Sometimes I think just stars line up. As you mentioned, we've known each other for a long time, 15 years or so, always been out drinking, sometimes singing karaoke and so forth. And I think we've constantly discussed about doing something together.
Yeah, very true.
And now, I don't know, Dave. It just felt right this time. Or what do you say?
Yeah, I think so. We've been kind of focusing on keeping up with our hardware sales here. And again, we don't have in-house DSP plugin developers. And I know those guys, that's all they did. So it was when they expressed interest, we looked at a few products and it became pretty obvious which products hadn't been attended to and were good targets.
So it's sort of a case of tapping into each other's expertise and just working out the best way that you could help each other out, I guess, in that respect.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
I think that's how how Softube started, that we know about DSP and all that, but we always needed someone to piggyback on that knew the gear and knew how to, how it should sound and everything. So working together with companies like Empirical Labs and working together with Dave really helps us to, focus our DSP expertise on something that is already a product. It's already something that has been fine-tuned and perfected for a long time. And then we can go in with the DSP expertise and just try to recreate that in the best possible way. So that's a fantastic experience for us to work on a project like this.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic bundle that you guys have launched. As I said, there's four products: Mic Comp, Lil FR EQ, Trak Pack for Console 1, which is an all-round fantastic channel strip, as Paul has found out himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Lil Freak, which I mean, these are classic products, aren't they? Dave, I'd love to know, how these came to light, and when you knew you were onto something, I suppose, with this company, and then how you to work with somebody like Softube. Now, look, I've used the Console 1 and Fader 1. I love it. It's now part of my workflow, so I'm just going to be biased on it. I'm being honest about it. It's improved my workflow using these units. But what was interesting was moving away from what I normally use, the 4K SSL console, onto, which is brilliant on here, onto your Trak Pack. Now, obviously very different. I had thoroughly enjoyed playing with this for 2 hours. How do you know when you're getting close, and just how the intricacies must be utterly insane to get this right?
Well, yeah, it's, first of all, these guys, they're not beginners in the analog world either. Being engineers, they know how circuits work and whatnot. So basically, the Little Freak is a nightmare, though, just because of the number of sections, tons of filtering and parametric. Plus, you have this, probably the hardest part, Niklas, I would think for you, was the de-esser, right? The DS section.
It was difficult, but on the same hand, everything is so well engineered in the Little Freak, so that when you do the math, when you look at how the circuits work, they actually work that way.
And using it, just to interject, using that, because this is in the shape section, isn't it?
The de-esser, yeah.
So you've got the high pass from the Little Freak and the low pass in the input. Then you've got the de-esser and the high frequency limiter from Little Freak in the shape section, yeah?
Yeah.
So normally on the shape section, for anyone who hasn't used a C1, it would be your gate, wouldn't it? Your gate with a bit of, you've got your sustain and punch that you guys created. This is the mad thing about Console 1. Immediately, I knew how to use that de-esser, and I haven't used an analog version of that de-esser before. So clearly, you're right. Your mad brains, your amazing maths brains, my brain knew what to do with that in terms of threshold and whatever else. And I immediately, give it 30, 40 seconds, understood how that de-esser worked, which for me blew my mind a little bit.
It's all about the product that we work from, the original de-esser and the Little Freak, and just trying to recreate that. And as I said, the de-esser was difficult, mostly because we weren't reading the schematic correctly the first time, the first version you got, Dave. But when a product is so well engineered as, for instance, the Little Freak, so that you know what all the different parts do, they behave correctly, then it's so much easier to do the math than for something that is just, haphazardly put together. I would say that maybe the biggest challenge was the transformer in the Little Freak.
Yeah. Which is really, a lot of people don't know, is we use Rupert Neve, who recently passed away, very sadly. Rupert Neve designed transformer in that output section. And it's a very, very bizarre circuit. It's, a lot of people use transformers, but this particular circuit, which is a modified version of what's in the Neve, what is it, 1073, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Was in there, that console that is so beloved still to this day. In fact, if you get a chance, watch Sound City. It's a movie by Dave Grohl.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, I shouldn't say this, but it was free on YouTube for a while, just a few commercials in there.
Yeah.
But I think it is licensed on YouTube, actually. But the movie started out about this console, which the biggest part of the sound, in my opinion, is this output transformer circuit. And you're right, that's a weird circuit. It's most transformers, you have AC in and AC out, and it's like a coupling, like this side transmits to this side and it goes out. In that particular circuit, the thing I think is really bizarre, and again, it's hard to see if you put a scope on it, is this part that's the input, say, has DC across it, a lot of DC, as opposed to AC. And that DC just sitting there does a whole thing to anything that goes through it. And like I said just now, the frustrating thing is you can put an analyzer on there, spectrum analyzer, distortion analyzer, scope. It's very clean looking, right? But when you listen to it, and I'm sure someday somebody will find a test where you can actually measure it, something else is going on. It's clean, like when you measure it with distortion, 0.002, 0.003, very low distortion. But that DC sitting there across that transformer does weird stuff, right, Niklas?
Yeah, definitely. You can get, it is possible to provoke some weird things out of that transformer, especially with really low frequencies and stuff like that. But it has a very high bandwidth for an old school transformer.
Yeah, like 200 kilohertz it'll pass.
Yeah.
But so that, I could see that being the most difficult part. When I was looking at that circuit, first of all, I never directly copy anything, but heavily borrowed. And as I'm looking at this and trying to figure out, what can be improved and what problems there might be, even sometimes the improvement is just making it more easy to calibrate or reproduce. In our case, we had a different power supply. We wanted to make it easier to trim, because you do have to bias it with that DC across there. Again, I looked at it over and over and kept trying to figure. I knew how it worked, but trying to figure out why can't I see? I can hear what it's doing. It's definitely making a fatness and as Rupert himself said, sweetness to audio, and I couldn't measure it or scope it out. Just couldn't find it. But yeah, the guys did a great job with that, and it's a really weird circuit. Niklas, did you? I'm a little older than you, perhaps a lot older. Did you ever encounter what they call a video flyback circuit? Is basically what we used to drive CRTs.
Yeah.
They would pull this coil in one direction, and when you release that pull, the coil would fly back. And I always knew it as a flyback circuit. My brother used to be an electronics guy also. And that transformer circuit looks to me like that's its mechanism. It's got this open collector transistor, that can pull the hell out of stuff. It's like 100 milliamps, which is a lot for a single circuit. And it pulls that coil down, inducing the audio on the other side. But the thing that lets go, that in other words makes it swing positive, is this coil effect where the magnetic field collapses and pulls the circuit back up.
Now I want to reanalyze the circuits again, but so this guy is how it sounds when we are drinking beer at conventions.
Yeah. It's all about beer drinking. The beer facilitates the conversation.
Right, that's fair enough. We can all relate to that. Can we talk a bit about Mikey, the compressor and drive and character on the C1? I've just pulled up a project here I was working on earlier, and I loved the compressor and the drive and character. Again, just from my normal experience, I would normally suggest, and it did seem to be a similar kind of workflow. The more I move the drive, of course, you're going to get that distortion, harmonic distortion, and that growl, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's actually, I would say that one of the great things about Mike E is how the distortion, the SAT in the comp SAT and the compression interacts with each other, and the way they are balanced. With console 1, where we actually put a different, the drive in console 1 is actually post compressor instead of the drive in the Mikey, because that's just how the architecture in the in console 1 is. So you could actually get other sounds out of it by driving it differently, which is sort of, it's not how Mikey work, but you can get it to sound like the Mikey, and then you can. It's always difficult because we want to make sure that the console 1 customers feel at home right away.
Yes.
And then we also want to be as true as possible to the original. But this is actually a case where we had to sort of split them up. And with the character knob being, the Mike E doesn't have a character.
Yep.
We basically use the same sort of sweetener circuit as we have used for a lot of other distortions in console 1. So it's sort of a mishmash there.
So I wasn't imagining it then. So when I am driving it clockwise, it is giving you that a bit more brightness.
Yeah.
Which works great. But the of course, what it also does is make me want to use a piece of analog kit. I want to use the actual original now and just see, because it just sounds terrific. And the EQ is just outstanding as well. And I can only assume, because I haven't used the original, that the emulation is outstanding, and it clearly is, Niklas, because all of your stuff is. So yeah, any other sections that you want to sort of focus on, or anything else about this that we should dive into a bit?
I was curious about the Nuke mode, actually. I'm just looking at.
On the compressor.
Yeah. It's a nice little interface. Tell us a little bit about that, guys, and why that was sort of included on my key.
First of all, the name. It's people know the name. Scary though it is, but. The fact is it is a useful ratio, especially when you get a chance. Try it on something like a room. You want to make a room sound bigger.
Yeah.
you go to 100% mix in that case. But because we have that mix control, the Nuke is actually useful in a lot of places because you can, it's a severe ratio, but with the mix, you can, tame that a lot, and it keeps things present at the same time and exciting without sounding, if you don't use the mix, it sounds smashed. So with the mix, you can unsmash it a little bit, but still have this excitement and presence going on.
I did it on overheads. It was excellent. And just at about 30% mix, you're right, it smashes it, but you can eliminate a little bit. That'll take it out a little. That's the whole parallel compression thing, which is brilliant, isn't it? That whole that you've got, it's just fantastic. So yeah, I loved it. The Nuke is and it's a great name. You know where you are with it anyway, and it does what it says on the tin, proverbially.
But Dave, what about the 100 millisecond on the Mikey? That isn't really a 100 millisecond. It's different circuit.
Yeah, I wanted to back up just a little bit and address that, along with the fact that we've done a few plugins here, and I don't like if there's something you can do that makes something more useful, especially with they're relatively old now. I mean, I think the Mikey's at least 10 years old. I should know this, but I've never. But the fact is that if you can do something in the digital domain that gives you more options, more power, and more just ease of use, why not?
Yeah,
and these guys did a lot of neat stuff that I love, that in some ways makes it more useful than their hardware. Ease of use, like extended bar graph. Like the original Mikey, for instance, has a 4-segment bar graph. The de-esser section, again, very small bar graphs, and these guys blew them up much bigger, higher resolution. We wanted to try to make a really long attack, like SSL bus compressor length attack. And immediately I had to start a workaround, because you started to get saturation and you would hit the rails. You'd basically run out of headroom very quickly with a really slow attack, because it's like these giant transients all the way through. So they get through the compressor and then they start clipping stuff.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we did an unsatisfactory job of trying to lengthen that, but we had to put in a circuit to compensate so that the threshold was lower, so it didn't clip. But not these guys discovered it, as I did later on, when it was too late, in my case, that it basically sped it back up. When you lower the threshold, or conversely amplify the gain control signal, you basically speed it back up. So even though we had, 2 measurements for the attack, because of this circuit I put in there to try to stop it from clipping down the line, which it did, but it also stopped the attack from being different. And Niklas and my friends at Softube actually made it work a little more properly, while still providing the original.
Because it's a different sound in the even if the attack times are very similar between 20 and 100, it's a different sound, it's a different tone to it, which is a really nice thing.
Like you just said, Dave, to give it an almost another lease of life, and or just a twist, a creative twist, isn't it? And it obviously opens those doors to people that perhaps have never had the luxury of having some of those stunning boxes behind you there, mate. The actual beautiful bits of hardware that can use them in the most perfect, I would imagine, between the two of you, software form. So suddenly you've got your products in many more in the box setups as a result of such a collaboration.
Also, I just want to compliment Softube. It was the whole time they would say, "How about this?" and I would be like, "Oh, that's a good idea." And sometimes I would say, "How about this?" And we were all very open. Some stuff we couldn't really do, right? But for the most part, everything we decided we could do was a big improvement in one way or another. And thank you guys for being so easy to work with.
It's our pleasure. And I mean, having known you for so long time, I knew it would be a lot of fun to do this. So, I mean, the only difficulties are the time differences, but we're not that far apart.
I called him at 3:30 a.m. our time, and he was okay with it because I had missed a call the previous day. Niklas, didn't we, like a few years ago at the AES in New York at Fab DuPont's party, up on the roof, have a discussion about doing a collaboration, and we went to all kinds of conversations. Fab DuPont, you guys probably know, has Pure Mix. He has great parties at his studio, with a lot of the party actually up on the very, very roof. And I remember we sat up one side looking over the railing that, looks down into the street and buildings, and having a long conversation about this. But it's hard for me to remember, the way time goes. Was that 2-3 years ago or 6, 7?
Yeah.
I think the champagne party of the century, which it was in 2007 or 2009.
Wow.
So yeah.
There you go.
Wow. I'm such a way. My dad had a saying: each day is a little shorter, meaning there's this mental thing where as you get older, each day is a smaller slice of your life.
Yeah.
That's a scary but very accurate thought.
But one thing I also really enjoy is that working with hardware developers. That, I mean, Dave, for instance, doing the little freak, makes this super clean compressor. It's really, I mean, almost no distortion at all.
Yeah.
And then when we interview people on how they use it, then I usually turn it up so that the bad light goes on.
Right.
Okay. But the thing, I mean, it's software. We can do the super clean stuff, and you can still turn it up so the bad light goes on. Same thing with the preamp in the mic E, which is basically, in your mind, Dave, is just to balance your levels, make sure that you have enough input. While there are some people who use it as a crunchy type of distortion, which is very different from the CompSat way of distortion.
Yeah. And again, because I'm used the hardware, is a preamplifier for microphones. At first, I was kind of shocked when I would hit that. And when Niklas was telling me that people were using that to saturate, I was kind of like, oh, but then when you actually do it, it's again, thanks to these guys, it's another option of color.
We did that, the clean mode as well to the preamp, so you can actually turn all that preamp distortion off completely.
Yeah.
You can also get color through that de-esser, of course, without doing just what you want to do. I mean, it's a great de-esser, clearly, but you can mess around with bits there, again, maybe because of the software. But it phenomenal. Had all sorts of stuff going on there. And I was just, really, really impressed, but certainly a unique color to everything. And again, that has to be, Niklas, down to just something that I would say for you guys, of all the different bits and pieces I switch to, between be it on the output or the input or the EQ or just a complete console, then all the stuff is really, really strong. So it must be very satisfying now getting this collaboration going. And does it make you think, even though some bits may be challenging with these amazing circuits or crazy circuits, that you're going to do more?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so
as well.
too.
Yeah.
We just have to figure out what and how and when, and as you might realize by now, we take our time. But hopefully it won't be 15 years until the next product.
But what's interesting, you say you take your time, but these guys made this whole process. Once we got started, and the guys and I had defined what it was going to do, it was like months. You guys really worked.
Really?
You got a machine there, Niklas.
I was going to ask you that, what the start to finish, really. We're talking like months, not years, obviously.
6 months.
Wow.
Start to finish.
That is fast. Were you getting iterations of this, Dave? They were pinging to you or to your team or your creative team?
Yeah.
And then going back, what was that like actually? Being that the first one of this kind, were you moving this on a console one unit or using it in the box? How were you doing it?
Early on, I was using analog test gear to look at it, and of course, listening to it because I know what they generally sound like. But a lot of it is straightforward. For instance, a parametric EQ has a certain shape, certain boost and cut, and so I have limited tools in the box to do some of these measurements. So many of them were actually done with analog. I would come out there's MacBooks that I have is the A to D and D to A converters are very clean. So I didn't have to have a whole separate setup. I could literally take my MacBook over to my computer, my System 1 analyzer, which is audio precision analyzer. And I had a little adapter. I did have to get an adapter and wires to go in and out and test stuff. But yeah, they were very close right off the bat.
Really
close. And it was funny because a lot of times I'd get the build. Remember, twice this happened. I got the build and I'm saying, okay, let me think of a very specific example. The DS threshold. The DS would turn on sometimes when no signal was present. The thing that was interesting is the real hardware did that at first too.
Really?
Yeah. So when I saw this, I was composing a letter, and literally the next day I come into work, and I think Niklas, one of you guys, had sent me a thing saying we have to work on the DS or some, and I'm like, yeah. I said I did too, and on the real hardware. So the analogy is that their model was so accurate, it had problems that the hardware had.
Isn't it? That is staggering, isn't it?
Yeah, it was to me too, because when I saw this, I was like, well, I know it's this detector chip. Something I had to add a couple parts to stop it from doing this particular error, and you guys fixed it. The next rev, it was there, and then there's one more iteration. I think of the DS, and it was like, no, I can't find anything. So we knew it was done.
And I think that one of them go back to the well engineered part, but it's really if the math is correct, if you do the math correct, then you basically have a mathematical model of how this thing should work. And then, it's a bunch of steps getting that mathematical model to actually run in a fixed sample rate on a computer. But most of that during the 20 years we've been doing this have been automized, so we can, that things happens. But the mathematical model is key here. So usually, hopefully, when we do a project like that, we get well-defined schematics. We do the math. We don't even have to, open or listen to the unit until when we do the verifications. And then usually we realize that, this capacitor wasn't soldered on, or this knob is backwards, or stuff like that. Schematics is wrong, something like that. And then we usually have to do a couple of iterations to see their, bias levels might be off. Something is not behaving the way we thought it would behave. We had to enhance the model of a, transistor or something like that. But really, the beauty is that the mathematical model is like it's like a blueprint. When you get that right, everything is sort of right. It's not like it's right, but in this position it doesn't work, because you have like the framework, that the matrix that holds everything up. That is solid. The foundation is solid, and then you basically just have to iterate on the specifics of that unit, whether it's a transformer or specific op amps or detector chips or whatever it could be that differs from the blueprint. But with really well-defined and well-engineered units, it's usually quite little to do. I would assume that from Dave can probably answer this better, but I would assume that between two little freak units, there's very little deviation.
Yeah, they're very consistent. Yeah. You can probably imagine the worst part.
Yep.
Potentiometers. the potentiometers, pots, potentiometers are like snowflakes. There literally is no two identical. So on the thing that makes our little freak more expensive than some, besides all the sections and variety of processors, is we manually put on every single knob. So because the pots are different, you can't just, some knobs have you've probably seen this on guitars and amps and pedals and everything, where the shaft has a little flat side, so the knob can only go on in one position. We could never do that with the little freak. So we basically have little set screws and we manually put those on. So yeah, that was, again, trying to make them consistent was really just getting around the inconsistent parts. And most of that was just the potentiometers. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a very satisfying process, and doesn't sound like it was too stressful in terms of how close have we got this? Actually, pretty close straight away. Just a few revs, like you say, Dave. Well, it is zeros and ones, though, isn't it? It's the math thing that's really striking me here. I know that obviously is going to be maths, but the fact that it literally, if you get the maths right, you're basically there.
They're already starting from an approach that won't have a problem in the digital domain. For instance, Niklas, just doing like a parametric section where you've got that one sample delay, and you've got to basically the parametrics swing a pot from an output of one thing to the input of another thing. And if there's a sample of delay or whatever, it doesn't work like the analog would. But I don't even ask how they did it, because it just worked right off the bat and the curves are perfect. So
and it's it's also important, I think, very important when you do analog EQs in digital domain to not try to mimic. I mean, it is possible to dial in a normal digital parametric EQ so that you mimic the curves of the Little Freak, for instance. But it doesn't take you the whole way. And for us, we put a lot of, and sometimes for some products, not the Little Freak, but for some products, it's like, feels like why did we spend 2 months modeling this, working on the math to just get back to something that is, no one will probably notice if we did it the hard way or just, try to mimic it with the normal parametric EQ. But we take a lot of pride in that to make sure that we actually do it the proper way and make sure that everything is consistent with how the circuit works. And in some cases, like many years ago, we did a Trident A range, which is also a fantastic EQ, has a lot of character. And Malcolm Toft and Barry Blesser, I think it was working on that. And basically, they started with some like cookbook EQ circuits, and then they started to tweak, and Malcolm Toft was listening, and we need a little bit more of that and a little bit more of that. And what they ended up with is a circuit that's like, you can identify those building blocks somewhere, but then there's feedback loops and things going on. And that is typical circuit that's just absolutely impossible to just mimic. Because if you turn one knob, other things will happen. But when you do it the hard way, mathematical way, you get all that kind of interaction. And sometimes interaction is minimal, but I strongly believe that there are people that will appreciate that.
It's significant enough.
That. Yeah.
It's worth the trouble. Don't stop doing it.
Thank you.
No shortcuts.
And the thing is, since I wasn't the one who actually did the modeling on this one, it was mostly Anton. So if I'm saying that it was easy, he's going to kill me the next time we get back to the office. Luckily for me, we're still, isolated at home. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any parts we haven't yet covered? I think we've gone through most of that, haven't we?
I was just going to say about the complete collection that you guys have brought out as well. Obviously, it's all the Empirical Labs, new Empirical Labs and Softube products all in one bundle. And obviously, I'm curious to know what's in the pipeline after this?
We're right now. We're just gonna ease back, and next convention we're gonna have a beer. Maybe Gil will come around with some tequila again, and we'll figure out something new.
Yeah, when we do that, Niklas, that's when I'll grill you how you did some stuff in there. Because I had some questions like, how'd you get this right? From my own experience, I see a lot of coders not get stuff right. So tricks, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Tricks.
I'll make sure to bring Anton.
Oh, good.
Well, we'll have to find out which bar this is because I think we want to be there as well.
Let us know, guys.
All right.
I think one of the reasons why this project went so well during 6 months is that no one. I mean, we were a team of 5 people doing this, and
had nothing else to do.
Yeah, exactly. I have no gigs. I have no rehearsals. I have nothing. I'm sitting in front of my computer all day. So
yeah.
Niklas, I was kind of in this mode when this whole thing started. Just bear down and do some things that I hadn't done before. Just work. Because I work late at night, and often in fact, not often, but pretty much every night, I used to go out to a little pub right up the street, play some pool, have one beer, come back and my eyes would be adjusted away from a monitor for, half hour or whatever. And that was a very important getaway for me. And once that was removed with COVID, I had really a tough time for the first month or so. And then I said, okay, just forget about your happiness. Just assume, don't even think about it. Don't think about your stress. Don't think about if you're having a good time or a good life. Because generally work was, you enjoy work too. You have this activities that offset the work.
Yeah.
But with those gone, it was disorienting. I'm still very disoriented.
Yeah.
We've had, I don't know about you, but we've had some emotional explosions here.
What a great description that is. Yeah. I mean, I have quite a lot of those daily. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think we've all found it very tough. And especially this, what is it, Colby? 3rd lockdown?
Yeah, for us, we're in our 3rd lockdown.
And
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And now we've got April 12th saying pub gardens will be open.
Yeah.
Now we turned into March today, so I said to Colby earlier, at least I can say I'll see you next month for a beer. So it's small things. It's small things, but and that's got to be outside, of course. So we got to pray for some nice weather. So let's hope England has a good spring. Otherwise, we're all going to be under rain clouds, but we're still going to be drinking our beers.
Yeah.
The one thing I can say, my last thought on the whole pandemic, is that 10 years from now, when I think back, one of the things that will have come out of this is Softubes and our collaboration and some great products. So those two will be tied together, and that'll be the golden light will be this collaboration, but it's been a mess.
You know what? It's a nice way of looking at it, though. I mean, we've tried to say similar things in that we started our podcast during pandemic to help people on the mental health side of things, and we thought artists, creators, anybody in that kind of world, they get particularly anxious and worried about their own, are they good enough at this or that? And then if they're out there trying to earn a living, playing shows or, all that kind of thing that all you guys can relate to, we thought, God, we've got to try and help these people. And if it wasn't for that happening, we wouldn't have started this podcast brand, which has become really exciting for us. So, little things that you can grasp hold of and say, well, at least we got that done. And at least we were able to do some good as well. From my point of view, a massive congratulations, guys, on creating something that is excellent and yet another great Softube product.
Thank you.
And I'll let Colby sign off, but I look forward to seeing you guys in real life. We've made so many friends over Zoom. It'd be lovely to see you in a real bar, and the first round at least are on us.
Oh, that sounds great.
Sounds great. I look forward to it too.
Yeah, just coming back to, I mean, that comes back to what I said at the beginning, guys, about why did you don't choose to do this launch during lockdown? But exactly what you just said, Paul. It's a nice time to give music makers something to have a little bit of fun with, right? At a time when there's not much else for them to do. So it's nice that you guys were able to do that, and in such a meaningful way as well with these products. So yeah, it's been cool talking to you guys about today, obviously, and really appreciate your time, guys. And
thank you, guys.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And
we're honored and honored your interest.
Well, we are interested and we're very impressed as well. So it was lovely to meet you. We feel Headliner's got a couple more friends, so we're looking forward to seeing you on the other side.
All right.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Good to see you, Niklas.